Hello, welcome to a podcast episode. Today we're going to be talking about, well, I was going to call it the biggest mistakes that I've made in my business. You could say they're mistakes. Perhaps if I reframe that as things that I wish I'd known sooner. There you go. That sounds a little less dramatic. And there's some good ones in here. So regardless of whether you've just recently started your business or you've been established for a few years, I think this video is going to be beneficial, shall we say. And it will be interesting to hear if any of my mistakes are things that you too can relate to. Or maybe you've got some brand new ones, in which case, let me know. I bet I'll have made them already. I bet you. I mistake all the time. But it's one of the best ways to learn, so hey ho. Before we jump in, I do need your feedback, if you would be so kind. As I said, this is the podcast, and it's been called, up until recently, the Coffee and Craft Podcast. Now I do have a bucket of coffee. This isn't actually my cup, this is my daughter's cup, and it was designed and sent to me by the lovely John. Hello, John. I've nicked Alessi's cup, but I need coffee, lots of coffee, so she won't mind. Where was I? The podcast name, right, Coffee and Craft. So the coffee is present, the craft is not, and the craft is rarely present these days. I've always wanted to come up here and talk about all things business. Sometimes I drizzle in some Etsy stuff, but to be honest with you, they have been Etsying so hard and fast over the past couple of years. I would argue that I've frankly, I don't have the energy for it. I would rather let them do their thing and just sort of, once the dust has settled, look and see at what things that they've done actually matter and what don't matter at all. And the vast majority don't matter at all. We're putting a pin in that for today, and I'll come back to it another day perhaps, but just, I don't have the energy for Etsy today. But we are talking business stuff, obviously, and that is what this podcast is about, business stuff, not necessarily craft stuff. But that's okay, because I have another channel, because I haven't got enough to do. Someone told me off the other day because I keep mentioning the other channel and then not telling you what it's called. Sorry. To be honest, I don't think it's a good fit for the majority of you watching. It's Beechtree Handmade, and I mainly share hand embroidery stuff there, and I will soon be sharing my progress on trying to knit socks. So there you go. Very, very different to what I do here on this channel. If that sounds like your cup of tea, then go find it. I'll put a link below if you're interested. And rock up for that nonsense. But the Coffee and Craft Podcast is going to move there because it's a better fit for it. This podcast is going to stay here, but it needs a new name. Hence the feedback, because can I think of a new name? No, I can't. All I know is I don't want it to include the name coffee. I mean, coffee will be there because I can't function without it, but just a name that's a better fit for this channel and that will tell people what it is that they're going to get. Be kind, please. Right, okay, that's enough digressing. It will happen again, don't you worry. Actually, one last thing before we dive in. I'm getting sick and tired of filming on my phone, and I have a beautiful camera. Why am I not filming on my camera? Honestly, because I'm scared of it. That will not do. Done is better than perfect, Kim. Come on. Right, I'm only going to get good at this if I try it. So, say goodbye to the phone. Okay, wow. Oh, it's dark. I kind of like it though. Definitely the colour is better. Not quite so washed out as I was. Anyway, hello. This is going to take some getting used to. Why did I not film on this camera before? I was afraid I would break it. Now, let's get to the topic at hand. And I apologise that it's taken this long. The podcast episodes aren't always this waffly to begin with. It just is today. So as I said, the topic of today are my biggest, no, not mistakes, the things that I wish I'd known sooner in my business. There you go. I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. And the first one has got to have been diversifying or not diversifying sooner. Now, I've made a video before about my Etsy journey, and that was where I started my business. It was on Etsy and only on Etsy, and it was growing, and that was great. And then at some point I got it to the point where it was literally paying my bills, and that was amazing. And it also doesn't feel real I'm going to be honest. If I hadn't have lived it, I'm not sure I would believe it. For example, at one point, it was a routine of mine to wake up, look at my phone and see how many orders were waiting for me because they would come in overnight. And I switched off the cha-ching noise because that got annoying. What a wonderful problem to have. But I took it for granted. That was the norm. And as I say, if I hadn't have lived through it, I'm not sure I would have believed it, because my products were different back then, but they were still handmade. So I was making I was making clothing, but I fell into festival clothing specifically, very sparkly, bright, festival clothing. It was the sort of stuff that at the time you could only get online, and specifically on Etsy, which made it a bit of a unicorn product. But it meant the demand was there, and the demand was high. So it kind of sold itself. I really didn't have to try very hard. Again, I took it for granted, and this is the problem, or this was the problem. I took it for granted. I didn't have the time to stop and focus on something else just in case this bubble burst, which it did, because it was constant. And I was struggling to keep up with demand. Sales were that good. And then things changed at Etsy. And a lot of changes came in all at once. And I remember them when they were announced, me thinking, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. And it took a little while for all of them to trickle down to the point where they were affecting me in my shop, but trickle down they did. And I still, despite the fact that I had that little wriggle room of time of being able to see that this change was coming, I still could not get off the hamster wheel to prep. So when these changes hit me, they hit me hard. And my sales pretty much halved overnight, because what happened was some of those changes meant that I pretty much lost my US customers, and they made up half of my income. So it was like, oh no, what now? Well, I wasn't selling as much, so I had time. So I had to pivot hard and fast. Oh boy. And it was so stressful trying to sort of squirrel together the money to pay the bills each month. Luckily, I had saved up a buffer. I already had like 3 months worth of bills saved up, and a little bit of miscellaneous savings too. That they quickly went, but luckily having that meant that I was able to pivot. It took some time, I'm not going to lie. And would I put myself in that position again? No, I would not. That was, you know what, I'm going to call it a mistake, because that was definitely a mistake, my biggest mistake. And I know all of you watching will have heard the whole diversify your income streams, diversify, and you'll be like, great, what does that even mean? Or I don't have the time, like I did. But oh my goodness, it's good advice for a reason. And it's the kind of advice that will never go away for a reason. The amount of stress, and it was real stress. When we're not just talking about, oh no, what am I going to do? It was horrible, and went on for near enough 2 years before I was able to complete the pivot and get the business back up to a point that it no longer made me want to cry on a regular basis. So pivoting can look like a multitude of things. I mean, you can pivot your items and the things that you sell. So if you sell physical products like I do, you could pivot into a digital product or a service or even print on demand, I guess, just a different niche. So yes, products are a way that you can pivot. Your platforms, don't just use Etsy for the love of all that is good. Some people have, depending on your product, depending on your thing, some people have good results with eBay, Amazon even, and there are plenty others. We talked recently in previous videos about social media. That works for some, not all. I have my own website. That's another way that you can diversify platform-wise. So you've got your products, you've got your platforms, but you can also think of diversifying in terms of your income streams. For example, I have two here. I've got my shop, or shops if you include website and Etsy as two different ones, but shop, and then of course YouTube channel. Just spread yourself out a little bit. You don't have to do all of the things. I would recommend experimenting with all of the things, not all at once, that's going to be overwhelming as heck, but just experimenting with different platforms and different things and see what works for you and what doesn't. Don't be afraid to drop anything that doesn't work for you like a hot potato. I really do think that quitting things is a very important part of running a business. And I think we've been done dirty by being brought up thinking that quitting is a bad thing. It's not. And if you look at anyone, if you want to think of any of the millionaires, billionaires, whatever, people in the world, you will see people who quit a lot. They're not hell-bent on making something work because I started it. It's like they can see that something's not working and it's like, fine, not worth my time, and they move on to the next. And yet we vilify people who do that. It's like, oh, they're flaky. They didn't see that thing through. Good, because why should you if it's not working for you? Drop things. If it's not working for you, drop it. And focus on the things that are actually worth your time, because your time is so precious. Yeah. And then hopefully once you've experimented a little bit, you'll end up with a small collection of places and things that work for you, and then you can focus your time and energy on those things. So there you go. There's my first biggest mistake, the thing that I wish I'd known sooner, and that was diversify or die, for fear of sounding dramatic. Okay, the second thing, and I kind of alluded to this, was I wish I had created my website sooner. I was put off for the longest time because of the reoccurring cost. I have a Shopify website. When I set that up, it was £20 a month, and it is now 25. Thanks, Shopify. That was awesome to wake up to. I swear, this year the goalposts just keep on moving. Once you are at that point where you are making enough money month on month that you can justify the cost, the monthly cost of running a website, I wholeheartedly recommend that you do so, because it's that you'll have heard it, the build your business on your own land. Now, yes, there are always going to be people that go, I think you'll find that a website is not your own land. Oh, shush. Granted, there is nowhere on the internet that is your own land. However, having your own website is definitely more akin to having your own land as opposed to somewhere like Etsy, isn't it? I think we can all agree on that. For a start, if somebody goes onto my website, they're already keen because they're on my website. If they're not there to maybe look at my products, they're there to check out the website, which is fine. You're always going to get people who do that. But on average, they're going to be warmer customers than someone who maybe falls upon my shop or my items on Etsy. The other thing, once somebody is on my website, I'm not having to continue the battle against competition on my actual listings. There's no one there. It's just me. It's my space. Whereas on Etsy, Etsy's like, but what about this? What about this? You showed a minute interest in this. Can I interest you in this? No, go away. The website though it's given me a chance to breathe, and I do feel more relaxed there now, because I just feel like, great, this is my space. I can do what I want with it. And to be honest with you, I used to focus really hard on driving my own traffic to my Etsy shop. And the majority of my sales and my visits don't mean anything unless you're getting sales from them, by the by. But all of that good stuff, I was the one doing all of the work to get it. I got one or two here and there from Etsy, but definitely not enough to justify running a business. So I had to do all of the legwork. So it's not changed for me. I'm still doing the exact amount of legwork, and I'm doing it on my website, and I'm making more money, which will probably be not a surprise to anyone. Because Etsy fees, oh boy, are they adding up? I mean, again, this is not a video about Etsy, but I worked out all of the fees on one item recently, and I was just like, oof. The other thing that put me off getting a website for so long was just the task ahead of me with building it. And I can't sit here and tell you, unfortunately, that it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was. It was as bad as I thought it would be. It was painful. I hated it. I've made videos on that, and I don't want to talk about it. The one good thing to doing it yourself is that it's a steep learning curve, and you learn so much in a short space of time. At least now I do think that if things went wrong with my website, to a certain degree, there is stuff that I could do myself. So that's an investment in my skill set, I guess. So I don't regret that, but it was painful. All I would say, and I've said this 1,000 times, give yourself time. It is not a it is not a one-day job. Yeah, just give yourself a huge chunk of time and chip away at it. A few tasks here and there, maybe even one task here and there. Just see it as a project that will be ongoing for a little while. For me personally, the thing that made me make the jump and go, right, I've got to stop putting it off, now's the time. I basically looked at my fees, my Etsy fees, which is the only place that I was selling at the time. I know, but I'm diversifying now, so shush. I looked at the monthly fees that I was spending every single month for the past 6 months to a year, and I realized that I had way overshot how much it would cost me to run a website. I was already paying more in Etsy fees than I would running a website, and the fees that would go with that. So I was like, okay, then now is the time. Now, if the sales that I was making on Etsy were all organic, that wouldn't have been the best way to go about it, because instead of switching the cost from one platform to another, that would just be doubling the cost, because I would be having to pay all of these fees in organic Etsy sales, and then I would have to go and pay a website monthly fee. So you do have to think about it from that point of view. The reason why I did it was because I wasn't getting organic Etsy sales. I was generating my own, as I've said. So I knew that if I just switched my attention to something else, I would be pretty much moving over the sales from this platform to that platform. And that's exactly what I've done. So if anything, I have decreased my outgoings in terms of fees. Again, it all comes down to knowing your numbers and how many organic sales that you make, how many sales you generate, and your time. For me, it's been a game changer, and I wish I'd done it sooner. Bearing in mind that I've been doing this for 10 years and I've only just got myself a website. If you're new and you're just starting, don't worry so much. But for me, I definitely should have done it sooner. Okay, and the third thing that I wish I'd known sooner, and this is going to sound so generic and so trite, but bear with me, and that is that I wish I had known that the moment I stopped caring about what other people would think, that would be the time that I would start to grow and start to succeed in the ways that I wanted to. Now, I'm not sure how relatable this is going to be to you, because this is definitely a me thing and everyone's going to be different. But I kind of knew that I was holding myself back for a long time because I was worried about what other people would think. I was worried about other people judging me and speaking negatively of me. And often I would hear my voices of self-doubt, but I would apply faces to them, people that I'd known in the past who had been critical or who had upset me in some way. And I would worry about these insignificant idiots from my past, and I would let them hold me back. Not always insignificant idiots. Some of them were also people around me that I cared about very much, and I didn't realize that I was holding myself back because I was worried about them as well. You have to surround yourself with people who want the best for you and who don't just want to hear what you have to say when you're struggling. They can't be triggered when you're doing well. And if someone's going to be snarky the moment that you start getting somewhere, and tall poppy syndrome, sort of trying to cut you down, if you're going to surround yourself with people like that, you're only going to get so far, because they get in here. They may not even mean to, they may not even realize they're doing it. I think that many of us have individuals like that in our lives. We can't, unfortunately, distance ourselves from all of them, because some of them are family members, and that's great. Sometimes family members just don't understand what we do, and it can come from a good place. They can be genuinely worried about us and they want us to thrive, but they can be dismissive. Many of us will have heard the you know, the old nugget, when you're going to go out and get a proper job. I got that as well, and it was awkward for a while, and I got through it by basically just putting up boundaries, and I had to have some uncomfortable experiences where I had to defend those boundaries. It's never nice, but you only have to do it once or twice, and then people will start to treat you the way you expect to be treated. Don't call your business a little business or a little side hustle. Just don't use any kind of language that's dismissive and that allows people to dismiss what you do. It's a business. And this is one thing that I referred back to quite a few times, which shut a lot of people up. Number one, I pointed out that I was paying my mortgage with my business, and therefore it was a job. And then second of all, I also pointed out that if HMRC, which is our tax people here in the UK, if HMRC considered me to be a business, then that was good enough for them. It's getting a little bit heavy, so I'm just going to pep it up a little bit. My point is, the moment I was able to work through that head stuff of not worrying what other people would think, how they would receive my stuff, how they would perceive me, yeah, unsurprisingly, things started to move. It's very difficult to do, I'm not going to lie, because it means allowing yourself to be vulnerable and opening yourself up to criticism and doing the bloody thing anyway. And it's not fun. There's no easy fix. I don't know why I'm finding it easier. I think seeing the results from cutting out negative people from my life, seeing just how much of a difference that made, I think that did sort of boost my confidence. Maybe age is also a factor. I do find that I care a lot less the older I get. It's an ongoing skill, but it's one that you will have to, it's like a muscle. You're going to have to flex it and keep it strong. And it's not always going to feel good, but it's one of the biggest things in terms of building a business. You've got to care less what people think, a lot less. Okay, and if you've made it this far into the video, then here's a quick bonus one. Another mistake that I've made, or another thing that I wish I'd known sooner, was not to take my business so seriously, which seems like the complete opposite to what I've said in regards to, you know, small business and all the rest of it. But what I mean is not holding on to it quite so tightly and not letting it define you. I've made that mistake before, where I kept thinking that the results that I got from my business, the reception that my work got, that sort of thing, how many views a video would get, for example, all of these things defined who I was as a person. Once that gets in there, that's a different kind of a killer. You need to be careful of that. I constantly have to bring myself back to that, remind myself of why I started this business in the first place, which was so that I could spend more time with my kid. And that's exactly what I'm off to do now, actually. I'm going to stop filming, stop wittering on at you, and we're going to go and do some baking or something that is no doubt going to be very messy. But it's going to be fun. So thank you for listening to me witter along. I could have carried on, but my battery is about to run out. So I'm going to go now, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.